I am the Lord your God, and I have come to speak to you now, because the heavens trembled when your name was spoken. 2 of my angels stood before me, trembling, their wings shaking in holy fear, because of what they saw surrounding your life. Listen carefully, for this message is urgent. A curse has been marked against your destiny, and if you do not act, you will watch blessings worth more than 550 million slip through your hands. I have seen the snare the enemy prepared for you. He used envy, words of deceit, and the spirit of delay to surround your prosperity. But I, the Lord, will not remain silent. I send this word to awaken your spirit, because time is short, and the battle for your destiny is already raging in the invisible realm. You were chosen for abundance. From the moment you were formed, I placed within you the seal of greatness. But the enemy has studied your lineage. He searched for weaknesses, for open doors, for the smallest crack through which he could enter and attach a spiritual chain. That chain has held back opportunities, wealth, and divine connections that belong to you. When my angels looked upon your photo, they saw more than an image. They saw a light hidden beneath layers of shadow. That light is your divine calling, yet they also saw a dark hand gripping your fortune, blocking the flow of what I have already decreed to be yours. This is why they trembled, not because of fear of the darkness, but because of the power that has been assigned to you and the great war being waged for it. I tell you now, you stand at the edge of release. Heaven has issued an alert. The curse must be broken, and it will not happen by chance. You must awaken, speak, and declare my name with faith, because faith is the weapon that breaks chains no human eye can see. Do you remember when I said, in my word, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven? That law still stands. The moment you open your mouth to agree with my decree, the prison doors begin to open. The curse that has been feeding on fear and silence begins to dissolve under the fire of my spirit. But hear me well, delay is not your friend. Every moment of hesitation feeds the power of the curse. The enemy thrives on indecision. He whispers, maybe tomorrow, maybe later. But I say, now. Because the blessing waiting to be released carries a divine deadline. The moment you receive this message is the moment your trial begins. You can rise into favor or remain bound by resistance. When my angels trembled, it was not out of defeat. It was the sign that heaven was watching your test of obedience. This message is not coincidence, it is intervention. You have been chosen to hear what many ignore, the truth that the spiritual world is not silent, and that divine wealth is real. There is a number written in the scroll of your destiny, 550,000. Do not see it as only money, but as a symbol of all that was meant to flow into your life: prosperity, peace, restoration, and authority. That number is prophetic. It represents completion multiplied by divine favor. Yet the curse seeks to reverse it, to transform what was meant for abundance into ashes. But I, the Lord, am merciful. I have sent this word to bring exposure to what is hidden. And when what is hidden comes into the light, it loses power. Tonight, I instruct you. Begin to pray. Father, expose every shadow around my name. Burn the cords that bind my fortune. Let your angels war for my inheritance. When you do, my fire will descend, for I dwell among those who speak my truth in faith. I will send one angel before you to guide, and another behind you to guard. The trembling they felt when they saw your image will become strength in battle. You will feel the shift in your sleep, in your mind, in your finances, as the curse begins to crumble. I am the Lord your God. I have seen your tears, your fears, and your near victories that turned into disappointments. But I tell you this day, if you receive my word with faith and obedience, you will see doors open that men said were forever closed. The curse that has been attached to your name will detach like dust in the wind. Listen closely. You are standing on holy ground. The very fact that you are hearing this now means the heavens are moving in your favor. Do not doubt. Write this truth upon your heart. God is breaking the curse now. The angels trembled because of what you carry. But I, your God, will make the trembling cease and turn it into victory. Watch as what was delayed is delivered, what was stolen is restored, and what was cursed is consecrated. Now speak it aloud. The curse is broken. I receive my divine inheritance. Your words will be recorded in heaven. Type Amen if you receive this divine message. In the next 48 hours, a divine transfer is being prepared for you. When you give with gratitude, you unlock what heaven already set aside for your name. Show your faith by sending a symbolic $100 super thanks now. It's your act of trust before the miracle arrives. The moment when two angels trembled, it began in silence. A silence so deep that even the air seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere beyond the realm of sight, two celestial beings stood before a brilliant light. They were messengers of heaven, warriors of peace and judgment. And yet, on that day, they trembled. The vision started when your name was spoken. A sound echoed through the higher realm. Your name, your essence, your image. It was as if a photograph from earth had been carried into the light of heaven. And when the two angels looked upon it, something stirred. One angel's wings folded in awe. The other covered his face, as though unable to bear what he saw. Why? Because around your image there was a battle. A storm of shadows moved like smoke, circling your light. These shadows were not stronger than the angel, but they were persistent. They represented words spoken against you, jealousy, betrayal, and silent attacks that you never even knew existed. The angels trembled, not because they feared darkness, but because they saw the weight of the calling upon you, the size of your destiny, and the resistance surrounding it. They saw how the enemy had woven delay into your path, how blessings were diverted, how open doors were shut just before you reached them. One angel spoke, "Why is this one surrounded by so much resistance?" The other answered, "Because what they are destined to carry could bless nations, and the darkness knows it." At that moment, a heavenly decree was released. Your name was written in light, sealed for restoration. But as the angels prepared to act, they saw the curse, an invisible contract tied to your fear, to your exhaustion, to every time you said, "Maybe it's not meant for me." That is why they trembled, because heaven cannot move until faith speaks louder than fear. In that moment, a voice from the light declared, "When they awaken, when they believe, when they speak truth over themselves, the curse will break and the floodgates will open." Those words still echo today. The angels wait for that awakening. The curse has no authority when faith is alive. This story is not a warning, it's a revelation. Somewhere beyond your understanding, something has seen your potential. Forces of light and darkness have recognized your power before you even knew it yourself. And now, heaven waits for your agreement, not in fear, but in confidence. When you pray, when you forgive, when you choose hope again, that trembling turns into triumph. The angels rise, their swords drawn, ready to tear apart the resistance. And here on earth, small coincidences will begin to unfold. Unexpected messages, forgotten opportunities returning, old wounds finding peace. These are not random events. They are the signs that the trembling has ended and that divine order has begun. So if you feel something stirring inside you now, a sense that this story touches your soul, it's not imagination, it's recognition. Somewhere, your name is still written in light. You were never meant to live under a curse of limitation. You were meant to walk under grace, under favor, under divine protection. And this moment, hearing these words, is part of your awakening. If you believe that divine forces are still working in your favor, that angels still watch, and that no darkness can stop a destiny blessed by heaven, then say it out loud right now, so your own ears hear your faith. I am surrounded by light, and my time of restoration has come. Then, write it in the comments below. Let your words be a declaration that breaks fear and calls in favor. Comment, I believe in divine protection. Because when faith is spoken, heaven listens. Before your blessing reaches you, heaven watches for your sign of obedience. A $100 super thanks is not a payment. It's a declaration of faith. Give now and let God see that your heart is ready to receive the photograph that revealed the invisible. It started with an ordinary moment, a simple picture taken without a second thought. A quiet evening, soft light from a lamp, a familiar face caught in a frame, nothing unusual. Yet, sometimes, what seems ordinary becomes the doorway to something unseen. When the photo was developed, there was something strange about it. Not frightening, just different. Behind the familiar smile, behind the calm expression, there was a faint shimmer, a distortion in the light. It wasn't easily explained. Some said it was just the camera flash, but to others, it felt like something more, a trace of energy, a whisper of a story not yet told. One evening, a friend looked at the image and said softly, "Do you ever feel like something follows you? Not in darkness, but in purpose?" The question lingered. It wasn't superstition, it was intuition. Sometimes our lives carry energy so powerful that even light seems to recognize it. The photograph began to symbolize something deeper, a reflection of invisible battles and invisible protection. You could almost sense it, the tension between what tried to stop you and what kept you going. Every challenge you had faced seemed captured in that faint shimmer behind your image. It was as if life itself had taken a snapshot of your resilience. Over the days that followed, strange coincidences began to occur. Old memories resurfaced, moments where you had narrowly escaped loss, times when unexpected help had appeared, and days when your strength returned just as you thought it was gone. You began to realize the truth hidden in that image, that the invisible is always present. We all carry energies, hope, fear, prayer, forgiveness, and they shape the world around us in ways we can't always see. The photograph became a mirror for your soul. It whispered that everything you've been through, every delay, every disappointment, was not a punishment, but preparation. You started to notice how often people spoke your name, how often conversations shifted when you entered a room. Some looked at you with curiosity, others with quiet admiration. And then it became clear. The light in that picture was not a mystery to be feared. It was the evidence of your spirit surviving through every shadow. It wasn't a sign of a curse. It was proof of endurance. It was the light of someone who had faced both chaos and grace and still chose to stand in faith. Maybe that's what the angels in every story represent. Not wings and swords, but strength and mercy. The kind of unseen guidance that keeps you standing when life feels heavier than you can bear. You began to understand that photographs don't just capture faces, they capture energy. They freeze the invisible for just a moment, long enough for us to recognize how far we've come. That image of you, slightly blurred, softly glowing, was never about fear. It was about revelation. It was a message that the universe, or God, or whatever name you give to love and protection, still sees you, still guards you, still waits for your faith to rise again. When you looked at the photo one last time, you whispered something only you and heaven could hear. "I'm still here. I'm still believing." And that's when peace returned. Quiet, gentle, undeniable. The air felt lighter, your thoughts clearer. What had once been a sign of uncertainty became a reminder that every shadow can hold light if you look closely enough. So tonight, if you ever doubt your purpose or feel the weight of things unseen, remember that photograph, not the image itself, but what it represents, your unseen strength, your quiet survival, and the love that never truly leaves you. Your light has always been there. Sometimes it just takes a strange picture to remind you. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own moments of faith, reflection, or mystery, take a second to write it down. Comment, "I am surrounded by light and strength. Because sometimes speaking faith out loud is how the invisible finally becomes visible. The sign of the blocked wealth. There are moments when life feels like a hallway of closed doors. You can see the light beneath them. You can even hear laughter or opportunity on the other side, yet every handle turns without opening. That sensation, the invisible resistance between effort and reward, is what many people quietly call blocked wealth. Wealth isn't only money. It is clarity, peace, confidence, and the freedom to move forward without fear. When that flow is interrupted, something in the soul begins to ache. You start to question your worth, your timing, your place in the world. But what if the blockage isn't punishment? What if it's an invitation to look deeper? The story goes that one night, after seeing that strange photograph, you sat alone with an open notebook, a tired heart. Bills on the table, ideas half-finished, dreams postponed. The air felt thick, as if every plan was wrapped in fog. And then, quietly, you wrote a question. What am I not seeing? It was an honest question, and that honesty broke something open. In that stillness, you began to realize that the wealth you sought had been flowing toward you all along, but it could not pass through cluttered hands. You had been holding fear, resentment, and comparison so tightly that your palms were too full to receive anything new. That realization hurt at first, but it was the beginning of freedom. You started to release small things, a grudge here, an unnecessary obligation there. You forgave someone who never said sorry. You closed an old tab of worry that had been open in your mind for years. Each act of letting go was like clearing debris from a river. Slowly, you felt movement again. Blocked wealth began to mean something different. It wasn't that the universe had forgotten you. It was that life was waiting for you to make space. Prosperity is a current. It looks for open channels. And every act of trust, every moment of generosity, widens that channel. Soon you noticed small shifts, an unexpected compliment at work, a friend offering help, a forgotten skill becoming useful again. These weren't miracles of chance. They were confirmations that alignment had started. You learned that true prosperity doesn't shout. It whispers. It speaks in intuition, in small doors opening quietly. It speaks when you pay attention to the lessons behind the delays. There's a simple truth hiding here. Abundance follows attention. Whatever you nurture grows. When you feed frustration, it multiplies. When you feed gratitude, the same law applies. One evening, you looked back at that notebook and saw the words, "What am I not seeing?" Beneath them, almost without thinking, you wrote the answer, "My own value." That single line unlocked something. For the first time in years, you stopped chasing and started creating. The fog lifted because you finally believed that you were enough. And that belief drew opportunities that had been circling, waiting for permission to land. So, if you ever feel that invisible wall between you and the life you're building, remember this: the block is never final. It's a message asking you to realign, to clear space, to believe again. Take a breath. Open your hands. Let go of one heavy thought tonight. Then speak this truth for yourself, quietly but clearly. I make space for abundance and peace to flow through me. If these words resonate with you, share them below. Write, "I am open to receive," in the comments. It's not a magic phrase. It's a reminder to your own mind that you're ready to participate in your future again. Because sometimes, the moment you decide to believe is the very moment the first door opens. The shadow of envy and sabotage. Every person who begins to rise carries a certain kind of light. It isn't arrogance or wealth. It's the glow of effort, resilience, and quiet belief. People can sense it before they can explain it. And not everyone responds kindly to light. At first, the resistance appears subtle. A friend withdraws. A colleague grows distant. Someone makes a joke that cuts deeper than they realize. It doesn't seem like much, but together, those small moments begin to feel heavy. You wonder if you said something wrong, if you're imagining it, or if the world simply changed while you weren't looking. But the truth is simpler and older. Not everyone can celebrate what reminds them of their own sleeping potential. Envy is rarely loud. It is quiet comparison. It sits behind polite smiles, behind forced congratulations, behind sentences that begin with, "I'm happy for you," but, for a while, you internalized it. You thought, maybe I should shrink a little, just to keep the peace. You stopped sharing your ideas as freely, hid your small victories, made yourself smaller, so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But shrinking didn't protect you. It only dimmed your own spirit. The story of your photograph had already taught you that unseen forces exist. Now you were learning that they can move through people too, not as monsters, but as misdirected emotions, fear, jealousy, insecurity. When people see light they haven't yet found in themselves, it can make them restless. The danger is not their envy, it's your reaction to it. If you let resentment or self-doubt take root, the sabotage completes itself from within. But if you choose compassion, you cut off the power of comparison at its source. So you started to do something unusual. You blessed those who misunderstood you. You wished them clarity and courage. Every time you felt the sting of jealousy around you, you whispered a quiet truth. May they find their own light. At first it felt naive, but slowly you realized that kindness disarms negativity faster than confrontation ever could. The more you wished others well, the lighter you became. Then something shifted. Projects that had stalled began to move again. New people entered your life. People who didn't compete, but collaborated. People who didn't question your worth, but reflected it. It was as if your openness had created a new frequency around you. You began to understand. Envy cannot survive in an atmosphere of gratitude. Sabotage loses its teeth when you refuse to become bitter. One evening, you remembered a line from an old journal. Light never argues with darkness, it simply shines. You smiled because you finally understood what that meant. From then on, when you felt judgment or resistance, you didn't fight it. You focused on your purpose. You let your work, your words, and your peace speak louder than your defenses. There will always be shadows, but shadows can only exist when there's light to cast them. The presence of envy is proof that something bright is happening. You learned to see it differently, not as a threat, but as confirmation that you are growing, moving, creating impact. So if you find yourself surrounded by subtle tension or misunderstanding, don't let it turn you cold. Use it as fuel to rise with integrity. Remember that your journey is not a competition. It's a calling to remain authentic even when others project their fears onto you. And tonight, as you think about those who doubted you or misunderstood your heart, release them. Free them in your mind. Whisper this to yourself. I am protected by peace, and my light helps others find their own. If these words speak to your current season, if you've felt the weight of unseen envy or quiet resistance, take a moment to declare your freedom from it. Comment, I choose peace over comparison. Because when you choose peace, the sabotage ends where it began, in the silence of your own decision to keep shining. You are standing before a door of divine wealth that will open within 2 days. Seal your faith with a $100 super thanks. It's your covenant with abundance and gratitude before the miracle manifests. The reaction of the angel. Some nights carry a stillness so complete that even memory seems to pause. It was in that kind of silence, the story says, that two unseen watchers, the symbols of everything pure, patient, and protective, leaned closer to the world of humankind. They were drawn by a single vibration, the sound of perseverance. They listened. It wasn't a prayer shouted into the heavens, but a whisper held inside a weary heart. I'll try again tomorrow. To the celestial, that single sentence glows brighter than 1,000 hymns. It means faith is still alive. The watchers, angels, spirits, however you choose to name them, responded not with thunder or spectacle, but with attention. They observed how every act of kindness you performed seemed to ripple outward, how each moment of restraint, when you could have struck back, built invisible strength. They saw patience, forgiveness, courage, and they trembled. not in fear, but in reverence. Because in the realm of light, courage disguised as ordinary life is the highest miracle. They saw how the shadows around you had tried to confuse your path. Discouragement whispered at dawn, doubt sitting on the edge of every new idea. Yet each time, you stood back up, sometimes shaking, sometimes unsure, but standing nonetheless. That movement, small and human, creates waves that touch things far beyond our sight. If they could speak, perhaps they would have said, "Look, this is what faith looks like when it wears a human face." The reaction of the angels is not about supernatural drama. It's about recognition. The universe recognizes persistence. The spiritual world reacts when a person decides, again and again, not to give up. You might never feel wings brushing the air around you, but you felt timing align, help arriving in the last hour, a message from a friend just when you needed strength, an opportunity reopening when you had accepted its loss. These are the quiet fingerprints of grace. That night, the angels bowed because they saw something rare, the exact moment when pain stopped being punishment and became purpose. They saw that the tests meant to break. You were shaping the compassion you now offer so easily to others. In their gaze, you were never a victim. You were a lesson in endurance written for others to read. And as they watched, they recorded something, not on paper, but in memory. Here is a soul learning to transform adversity into wisdom. You didn't see them, but you felt lighter the next morning. You walked through the same door, into the same routine, but with a strange calm. That's how heaven answers sometimes, not with firework, but with peace that makes no sense and yet fits perfectly inside your chest. The reaction of the angels was not only awe, it was movement. Each time you act from love instead of fear, they move closer. Each time you forgive, they draw strength. Each time you keep faith alive, the invisible world adjusts itself to meet you halfway. That's the real miracle, cooperation between the seen and the unseen, the human and the divine within. So when you wonder if your small acts matter, remember this scene. Remember that somewhere goodness responds. Light trembles not because it's weak, but because it feels deeply. Tonight, take a breath and let that awareness settle. You are noticed. You are accompanied. The quiet victories of your day echo further than you realize. Say it softly so your heart hears it. Every step of faith awakens light around me. If that sentence feels true to you, if it reminds you that unseen support exists when you least expect it, write it below. Comment, "I walk with unseen strength." Because when gratitude is spoken, the reaction of the angels continued. The divine decree of liberation. There comes a point in every journey when endurance turns into awakening. You have carried the lessons, the fatigue, and the questions for so long that they have reshaped you. Then, one day, something invisible shifts. The air feels lighter, your chest expands, and you realize you have crossed a line that isn't on any map. That invisible crossing is liberation. It doesn't happen because the world suddenly becomes fair. It happens because you stop waiting for permission to be free. The story says that after the angels witnessed your persistence, a ripple moved through the higher realm. A decision, not thunderous, but absolute. In every spiritual tradition, there is a moment like this, when effort meets grace, when a soul that has kept walking through uncertainty earns its release. The decree is simple: let them be unbound. On earth, it translated as clarity. You woke with a calm you couldn't explain. Problems that had once felt tangled began to separate into smaller, solvable threads. You noticed that you no longer reacted with fear to the things that used to control you. It was as though an unseen chain had loosened. Liberation rarely looks like triumph. It looks like stillness. It looks like being able to breathe in rooms that once felt heavy. It looks like forgiving yourself for not knowing better sooner. You started remembering pieces of yourself you had forgotten, the creativity that once made you lose track of time, the quiet confidence you had as a child before the world taught you caution. Each return of memory was a signal that the decree had reached you. You began to speak differently. You stopped telling the story of lack and started telling the story of learning. You stopped saying, "I have to survive," and began saying, "I'm allowed to grow." People noticed. They couldn't quite name what had changed, but they felt it. Your presence carried ease instead of urgency. Even your silence felt grounded. That is what spiritual freedom looks like from the outside. Peace that invites rather than defends. The decree of liberation isn't a single event. It's a continuing rhythm. Each time you choose honesty over pretense, trust over control, gratitude over fear, the decree echoes again. Unbound, 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 and liberation spreads. It moves through your relationship, softens conversation, heals misunderstanding. It reaches into work, finances, health, not as instant miracles, but as alignment, as the slow return of balance. You understand now that liberation doesn't erase struggle. It changes your relationship to it. You still meet challenges, but they no longer own you. You see them for what they are, teachers, not punishers. Every culture has its word for this freedom: salvation, moksha, release, awakening. But the essence is the same: remembering that the cage was never locked. Tonight, before you sleep, place a hand over your heart and acknowledge that truth. Feel the rhythm there, steady and ancient. It has always known the way home. Whisper this, not as magic, but as recognition: I am free to begin again. If that line feels like it belongs to you, make it visible. Comment, I am unbound. Because every time someone declares freedom with sincerity, the world grows a little lighter. The power of the consecrated image. Long before cameras existed, people believed that every portrait, every drawing, carried a fragment of the person's spirit. When the first photographs appeared, that belief didn't vanish. It changed shape. Something in us still feels that an image holds more than color and light. It holds presence. That's why the photograph in this story continues to matter. It isn't just paper or pixel. It's a record of what you've survived. Once, it was simply a face caught between shadow and glow. Now it's become a reminder, a consecrated image, not because of ritual, but because of meaning. To consecrate something is to set it apart, to decide that it will serve a higher purpose. You decided, without realizing it, that this image would no longer be proof of fear, but of growth. You stopped seeing it as strange and started seeing it as sacred, evidence that even in confusion, light finds you. You placed the photograph somewhere quiet, on a shelf, near a candle, maybe tucked inside a book. And every time your eyes found it, you paused, you breathed, you remembered how far you had come. In that moment, the image worked like a mirror. It didn't show who you were. It reflected who you were becoming. The power of a consecrated image is not mystical. It's psychological and emotional. When you attach intention to something you see often, it starts to train your mind. It turns into a symbol that guides your behavior. That's why athletes visualize victory, why children pin dreams to their walls, why people light candles for hope. The act of setting an image apart makes the invisible goal visible. Each time you looked at the photo, you whispered the same simple thought: keep going. That repetition built resilience. It created a habit of hope. Slowly, the image stopped being a memory and became a message. Then, something interesting happened. Other people noticed it too. Visitors glanced at the photograph and felt calm without knowing why. It carried a quiet authority, not because of what it showed, but because of what you had poured into it. Patience, forgiveness, persistence. You realized that objects remember how we treat them. When we handle them with respect, they echo it back. That is what true consecration means: the transformation of ordinary matter through mindful care. And so, the photograph became a small altar to gratitude. You didn't pray to it. You prayed through it. You let it remind you that faith, like light, can inhabit anything: a candle, a song, a picture, a breath. There are many ways to use such symbols. Some people write words on the back: peace, courage, healing. Others place them near natural light, so the sun touches them first in the morning. Some simply carry them as quiet anchors during uncertain days. What matters isn't the method, it's the awareness. You understood that your consecrated image was teaching you a larger lesson. Everything you face can be transformed by the way you see it. Fear turns into fuel. Delay becomes preparation. The photograph that once confused you became proof of that principle. Tonight, when you look at any image of yourself, old or new, try to see it differently. Don't look for flaws. Look for endurance. Look for the story behind your eyes, the one that has kept you alive through every storm. That is consecration, recognizing the sacred inside the ordinary. Say it quietly to yourself. I dedicate my past to learning and my future to peace. Repeat. If that sentence feels like what your heart has been waiting to say, write it where you can see it, or share it below to remind someone else. Comment: I see the sacred in my story. Because the moment you decide to view yourself with reverence, even a simple photograph becomes a window to grace. The signs that the block is breaking change seldom announces itself with fanfare. It begins in quiet corners, an unexplainable calm, a moment of clarity in the middle of an ordinary day. That's how you first noticed it. The heaviness that had clung to you for so long began to loosen, almost imperceptibly, like a knot coming undone after years of tension. The signs were subtle. You woke before your alarm, not out of worry, but with energy you hadn't felt in months. Small tasks that once drained you now flowed easily. The world hadn't transformed overnight, yet something inside you had. Then came synchronicities, little alignments that felt too precise to be coincidence. An old friend calling just as you were thinking of them, a message, a song, a phrase on a passing billboard that seemed to answer a question you hadn't said aloud. These weren't supernatural tricks, they were reflections. When the mind clears, the world begins to mirror that clarity back to you. You started noticing color again, the deep blue of evening, the green that hides in shadows, the way light bends through glass. You realized that the same awareness that sees beauty also recognizes opportunity. The block was never just external, it lived in perception. As your vision widened, doors you hadn't seen appeared in plain sight. One day, something surprising happened. You laughed, really laughed, for no reason. The sound startled you. It had been so long since joy had arrived uninvited. That laughter was the loudest sign of all. It meant that hope no longer needed permission. You began receiving gestures of kindness, a stranger's smile, a compliment from someone who rarely spoke, an unexpected offer of help. Each moment carried the same message. The current is moving again. And perhaps the most telling sign was forgiveness. You caught yourself thinking of someone who had hurt you, and instead of bitterness, you felt peace, not approval of what they did, but freedom from carrying it. Forgiveness is a quiet revolution. It signals that your energy has been reclaimed from the past. In this new rhythm, life doesn't become perfect. It becomes cooperative. Ideas come when they are needed. People appear at the right time. Even obstacles feel like guides rather than walls. You might still have days of doubt. Everyone does. But the difference is that now, the doubt doesn't define you. It passes through you without staying. When a block truly breaks, the outer world follows the inner shift. You'll notice conversations leading to solutions, creative sparks returning, financial or personal opportunities re-emerging. Yet the real treasure is the sense of participation. You feel part of the flow instead of fighting against it. This is the turning point in every story. The moment the hero realizes the cage was never locked. The door had been waiting for awareness all along. Take a moment now to recall the last small good thing that happened to you. The text from a friend, the calm after a storm, the idea that gave you courage. Those are your signs. They are proof that momentum has begun. Stand still for a breath and recognize it. Something within me has shifted toward freedom. If those words echo what you feel, mark them somewhere, on paper, in memory, or below this story. Comment, "I welcome the flow of new beginnings," because acknowledgement seals transformation. The more you notice these gentle signs, the stronger they become, until the current that once felt blocked carries you forward again, steady and bright. The test of faith and obedience. Every meaningful journey eventually narrows into a test. It's never about punishment, it's about refinement. The block may be broken, the path may have opened, but before the next horizon reveals itself, life asks one more question. Do you really trust the ground beneath your feet? This is the moment when old habits whisper for attention. Doubt returns, dressed as logic. Fear disguises itself as caution. You stand between the comfort of what you know and the uncertainty of what you want. That edge, the thin space between staying and stepping, is the test of faith. Faith isn't blind optimism. It's the quiet confidence that the same intelligence that guided you this far won't abandon you halfway. But to prove it, you have to act before every variable is clear. It might be as simple as making a call you've postponed for months, sending a proposal you keep rewriting, forgiving someone who never apologized, or finally saying yes to an opportunity that scares you. Each act of movement is a declaration. I trust the process even when I can't predict the outcome. That is obedience, not submission to fear, but alignment with purpose. You remember the old photograph on your shelf, the one that once symbolized uncertainty and later became a reminder of light. In the glow of a quiet evening, you look at it again and realize something. Every decision that shaped your life began in a moment like this, when hesitation met courage and courage won. Faith does not erase fear. It simply refuses to serve it. The test begins when excuses sound reasonable. Maybe next week, maybe when I'm more ready. But life rarely grants more readiness than the moment you have. Waiting too long can become its own form of disobedience, not to authority, but to your own calling. So you move, cautiously, but honestly. You send the message, you take the first step. The world doesn't shift instantly, but something inside you does. You feel taller, lighter. The energy that once stagnated begins to circulate again. That is how alignment feels, like the breath you didn't know you were holding, finally released. Then, just when you think the test is over, it deepens. Something unexpected interrupts your plan. A delay, a misunderstanding, a setback. For a moment, frustration flares. But this too is part of the design. Every test of faith contains a test of patience. You remember how long it took to reach this point. You survived envy, resistance, silence. So instead of despair, you choose perspective. You remind yourself that growth rarely follows straight lines. That small act, holding peace in uncertainty, is obedience in its purest form. As days pass, you notice that the delay wasn't denial, it was protection. What you thought was rejection was simply redirection. Each closed door leads you to a better aligned one. When you finally see the pattern, gratitude replaces frustration. You realize the test was never about proving worth, it was about proving readiness. By the time the waiting ends, you have become someone who can handle what you prayed for. That's how the spiritual laws work across cultures and time. The heart expands first, and the reward arrives to match its new size. Tonight, if you find yourself at a crossroad, half in fear, half in faith, remember this: you have already walked through darker valleys and emerged with light. This moment is no different. Take one deliberate step toward what calls you, even if the ground feels uncertain. The bridge appears only as you walk. Then speak this truth softly, not to the world, but to yourself. I trust the path even when I can't see the end. If these words resonate with where you are right now, anchor them by sharing them below. Comment, I walk by faith, not by fear. Because every test of faith is simply life, asking you to remember how much light you already carry. Numbers have always been humanity's way of measuring the infinite. We count stars, seconds, grains of sand, all the while knowing that what we measure is only a shadow of what truly exists. When the number 550,000 began to echo through your thoughts, it wasn't about money or chance. It was about scale. an image of magnitude, a reminder of how much life still waits to unfold. Think of what that number represents. 550 million heartbeats, choices, breaths, or opportunities. Each digit is a fragment of possibility. Together, they form a horizon so wide it refuses to be owned by fear. For years, you had measured your value by visible results: income, praise, recognition. But the more you tried to calculate worth, the smaller it felt. The day you stopped counting losses and started counting lessons, the numbers changed meaning. They became symbols instead of limits. So you took 550,000 and gave it a new definition. You called it the measure of potential. Each zero became a reminder of space. Space to forgive, to create, to love, to begin again. The fives reminded you of balance, the five senses, the five fingers that build and comfort, the five directions in many traditions: north, south, east, west, and the center that holds them all together. You wrote the number on a piece of paper and placed it near the photograph. It looked absurd at first, so large that it bordered on impossible. But that was the point. It forced you to stretch your imagination beyond reason. You realized that the soul also needs big numbers to practice expansion. In time, the number stopped feeling distant. You began to see its reflection in ordinary abundance: the taste of water when you're thirsty, the way sunlight warms your skin, the laughter of someone you love. Wealth, you discovered, isn't accumulation. It's awareness multiplied. The symbol worked quietly. Each day you noticed a new form of richness: ideas flowing freely, conversations deepening, gratitude arriving before success. You had always thought abundance would come to you. Now you saw it could come through you. That is the secret of large numbers. They invite you to think in terms of generosity. A heart that believes in infinite supply becomes one that shares freely. And in that giving, life finds its way back with interest no calculation can capture. The next time you saw the number, it no longer frightened you. It inspired you. It whispered, "There is enough. Enough time, enough grace, enough creativity to rebuild anything." The zeros no longer marked distance. They marked opportunity. That night, under a quiet sky, you folded the paper with the number written on it and placed it close to your heart. You closed your eyes and said not a prayer for wealth, but a declaration of readiness. "I am open to the vastness of life." And in that statement, the symbol fulfilled its purpose. The number didn't promise, it reminded. It taught you to measure abundance by gratitude, not gain. If this chapter speaks to you, if you sense that the measure of your own life is larger than what's visible, mark the thought now. Comment, "I welcome infinite possibility." Because once you stop fearing large numbers, you realize they were never about counting. They were about believing. There is a moment in every path of growth when holding on begins to cost more than letting go. You don't notice it at first. You tell yourself that control is safety, that to loosen your grip would be to lose everything. But slowly, the tension builds. Even good memories can become heavy when carried too long. The act of release is never easy. It asks you to trust in absence, to believe that space will be filled by something better. That's why the word sacred belongs here. Release isn't resignation. It's a spiritual decision, a declaration that you believe in renewal. You began to understand this truth during a quiet evening, when the air felt still and your thoughts, louder than usual, asked hard questions. Why do I keep replaying old fears? Why do I keep waiting for closure from places that never offered peace? There was no dramatic answer, only the soft realization that the waiting had become its own kind of prison. So you took a breath and decided to begin. Release can start small. You threw away the letter you never meant to send. You deleted the message you kept rereading for pain's sake. You stopped visiting the pages that reopened wounds. Each act felt insignificant at first, but afterward, you noticed the lightness. Tiny spaces opened inside you, spaces where peace could finally enter. Soon, you were letting go of heavier things: self-blame, unrealistic timelines, the need to prove your worth to people who had already made up their mind. You stopped chasing explanations and started choosing silence. Silence, you discovered, can heal more completely than any apology. The sacred act of release is not a single event. It is a rhythm you practice until it becomes second nature. Like the tide that withdraws to make room for the next wave, you learn that loss and renewal are not opposite but partners. As the weeks passed, the shift became visible. You slept deeper. Your laughter returned. You no longer woke up rehearsing battles that were already over. Friends said you looked lighter. You simply felt like yourself again. Then one morning, you did something symbolic. You picked up the photograph, the same one that had followed you through confusion, reflection, and healing, and you placed it in sunlight. For a moment, you just watched as the light spread across the image, washing it in warmth. You whispered, "Thank you." That single word was the essence of release, gratitude for what was, acceptance of what is, and openness to what will be. Every spiritual tradition teaches the same truth in its own language. The hand that releases is the same hand that receives. The heart that forgives is the one that heals, and the soul that stops fighting the past becomes free to create the future. You realized that release doesn't erase the story, it redeems it. It allows you to see how each ending was secretly a beginning in disguise. That night, you felt something new, a stillness that wasn't empty, but alive. The world around you hadn't changed, but you had. You were no longer dragging your history behind you. You were walking beside it, in peace. So here, at this quiet threshold, take a breath. Imagine setting down the last piece of weight you've been carrying. Watch it fall, gently, into the past where it belonged. Then say softly, not as command, but as truth, "I let go with gratitude, and I make room for peace." If these words feel like they belong to your current chapter, anchor them somewhere. Comment, "I am ready to release and renew." Because each time you choose to release, you participate in creation itself, the eternal rhythm of letting go so that something beautiful can take its place. When the noise quiets and the striving slows, something unexpected begins to bloom. Peace. Not the shallow calm that depends on perfect circumstances, but the deeper kind that grows from trust. You reach it almost by accident. After all the letting go, after the tears and the waiting, one morning you simply realize that your heart no longer races against time. That recognition is the real reward. Peace doesn't shout. It hums softly through ordinary moments. It shows up when you sip your coffee and actually taste it, when you answer a call without anxiety, when the evening sky reminds you that endings can be gentle. You start noticing that life is still imperfect, but no longer unbearable. Restoration follows that peace, like dawn follows night. It rarely arrives in grand gestures. It begins with small repairs, sleep returning, laughter finding its way back into your voice, ideas reappearing after silence. You realize that what you lost has been quietly rearranging itself into something more fitting. For a long time, you thought restoration meant getting back what was taken. Now you understand it means receiving what truly belonged. Some relationships return, transformed. Others stay in the past, but without bitterness. Opportunities re-emerge, not as rerun, but as new versions built for who you've become. The difference is that now you can hold them without fear of losing them again. Peace has changed your rhythm. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer demand, you align. You no longer pray out of desperation, but out of gratitude. That is restoration, when even the old wounds begin to serve a purpose, teaching empathy, sharpening discernment. People around you notice. They can't quite explain it, but they say things like, "You seem lighter," or "You look rested." What they're seeing is the absence of resistance. Your inner weather has cleared, and everything else reflects that clarity. You start to forgive time itself for not moving faster when you begged it to. You begin to thank the detours that once frustrated you, recognizing that they taught you endurance and grace. And with every act of gratitude, Peace deepens until it feels like home. Peace is not a prize given by the universe. It's the atmosphere that appears when you stop fighting what already is. Restoration is not compensation. It's continuation. Life finding new form around your healed places. So tonight, when you sit in the quiet, notice how much of the struggle has already resolved itself. Notice how your breath no longer trembles, how the future no longer feels like a threat, but an invitation. Say it gently, more to yourself than to the air. I live in peace, and peace restores everything I need. If this sentence feels like the truth your soul has been trying to say, make it tangible. Comment, peace restores me. Because every time someone claims peace aloud, the world becomes a little steadier, and restoration continues its quiet work. The gift of abundance. After healing, abundance was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be remembered. For most of your life, you thought abundance was something outside of you, a goal, a possession, a distant destination reached only after everything fell into place. But healing taught you something different. Healing peeled back the noise, the striving, and the belief that worth had to be earned. Beneath all of that, abundance had been waiting quietly all along. You first noticed it in the simplest things. The morning light came through your window a little differently, softer, almost patient. You realized you were breathing without rushing, that the quiet didn't scare you anymore. The absence of turmoil felt strange at first, like silence after years of thunder. But then you began to see that silence as fullness, not emptiness. Abundance began revealing itself not in quantity, but in quality, in the richness of single moments fully lived. The sound of your own laughter returned, not forced, not practiced, but honest. You could sit with yourself without reaching for distraction. You began to notice small details, the steam curling from a cup, the smell of rain before it starts, the warmth of a hand resting in yours. Each was a reminder that life still wants to be experienced, not merely survived. Before healing, you used to equate abundance with having more. After healing, you understood it as needing less. The freedom came not from acquisition, but from appreciation. You no longer needed constant validation or new achievements to feel alive. The peace inside you was no longer conditional. It didn't depend on who stayed, who left, or what the future might bring. It existed on its own terms, self-sustaining. There's a quiet power in reaching this place. You start to see beauty in things you once overlooked. The way sunlight moves across a wall, the rhythm of your own steps, the familiar face of a neighbor you used to ignore. Gratitude becomes effortless. Every breath feels like a small gift wrapped in air. That is the true abundance, awareness. When you're aware, life expands. A simple walk turns into a lesson in detail. The crunch of leaves, the pulse of wind, the conversation between earth and sky. Even the moments of solitude feel rich, because they're no longer loneliness, they're communion. You begin to sense that there's something larger than you, yet somehow inside you at the same time. Healing didn't make you invincible. It made you available to love, to joy, to compassion. You realize that abundance is not about ownership, but about flow. When your heart is open, everything good has room to move through you and toward others. That is why generosity feels so natural now. You give not because you expect return, but because giving itself feels like breathing. Somewhere along the way, you stopped fearing loss. You understood that what is truly yours cannot be taken. It can only change form. People, seasons, opportunities, they come and go like tides, but peace remains the constant shore beneath them all. That realization erased the desperation you once carried. You could finally hold things lightly without clinging. And when you did, life began to trust you again. Inspiration returned. You woke up with ideas you couldn't wait to write down, with songs humming quietly in your mind. Creative energy, once blocked by worry, flowed like water through open channels. That is another face of abundance, the ability to create without fear of failure. Relationships began to mirror your new inner climate. You attracted people who spoke gently, who listened deeply, who met your energy with calm rather than chaos. Conversations became nourishing instead of draining. You no longer confused attention with affection or intensity with intimacy. You learned that real connection is steady, not dramatic. It builds slowly, like dawn, until everything is clear. You understood that abundance multiplies through sharing. The more kindness you offered, the more kindness surrounded you. You didn't have to force harmony anymore. It unfolded naturally wherever you stood in authenticity. The old version of you believed healing would make you soft. The truth is, it made you strong enough to remain kind in a world that often forgets gentleness. That strength is abundance too. The strength to forgive without forgetting, to love without losing yourself, to stay open when life invites you to close. And perhaps the most beautiful change of all was how you spoke to yourself. The voice inside your head, once critical and relentless, had softened. You began to treat yourself with the same patience you offered others. Every morning became a new conversation. Not, "What did I fail to do?" but, "How can I care for myself today?" That shift changed everything. In that self-kindness, abundance settled permanently. It no longer arrived as a guest. It lived there. The more you practiced this awareness, the more it rippled outward. You found yourself helping without hesitation, listening without agenda, loving without fear of depletion. Giving didn't empty you anymore. It replenished you. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for you to learn that equation. What you give freely returns as peace. Abundance after healing is not a finish line. It's a rhythm, a way of moving through the world. Some days it hums softly in the background. Other days, it floods your senses, but it never disappears once discovered. It becomes a lens through which everything makes sense. The hard days, the uncertain ones, even the losses. They all become part of the same sacred pattern. Tonight, sit for a moment and look around you. Notice how much is already here. The walls that shelter you, the light that still finds its way in, the heartbeat that proves you're still in motion. None of it is small. It is evidence that life, even in its simplest forms, is generous. Whisper this truth to yourself, not as affirmation, but as gratitude. I am already standing in abundance. Let it settle into you like calm rain over soil that has waited too long. And if these words mirror something you've recently begun to feel, let them become a reminder for others too. Comment, "Abundance lives within me." Because when you recognize the wealth that cannot be measured, peace, compassion, awareness, you discover the most enduring truth of all. Healing wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of everything that truly matters. At the end of every journey, there comes a quiet turning. You don't always notice it at first. It begins with a soft breath, a pause between heartbeats, a sense that the long climb has reached a view wide enough to hold everything. The pain, the joy, the losses, the lessons. The noise fades. What remains is clarity. This is the moment when life itself seems to lean close and whisper, "You made it through." You have carried many versions of yourself through shadow and flame. You have shed identities like old skins, each one necessary for a time, but none meant to last forever. You have faced the dark corners of fear and discovered that they were never emptiness, only rooms waiting for light. Now, standing here, you realize the truth. The light you sought was never distant. It had always been following you, step by step, like dawn following a traveler through the night. It's easy to forget how far you've come when the world measures progress by speed, but healing moves slower. It grows in secret, like roots beneath the earth, silent, persistent, invisible until one morning something breaks the surface. That's what has happened to you. Your peace is visible now, your strength unmistakable. You are not the same person who began this story. The battles that once defined you have become part of your wisdom. The voices that once echoed doubt have quieted into memory. The old wounds no longer demand attention. They have turned into scars that guide others toward understanding. This is the final calling of light, the invitation to live from what you've learned, not from what you've lost. For years, you chased meaning, praying for signs, waiting for rescue. But the greatest sign was always your own endurance. Every time you refused to surrender to despair, light took another step toward you. Every time you chose kindness over resentment, creation itself expanded through you. The light never came to erase your past. It came to redeem it. You can feel it now, can't you? That still presence at the center of everything. It doesn't demand. It doesn't shout. It simply is. The more you trust it, the more the world aligns around it. This is not magic. It's harmony. When the heart steadies, life listens. The final calling of light is not an event. It's a way of being. It asks you to keep walking with open eyes, to meet each moment as sacred, no matter how ordinary it looks. It asks you to speak gently, to build slowly, to forgive often, to love without calculation. It asks you to remember that peace is not the absence of storms, but the calm that holds through them. There will still be seasons of uncertainty. The difference now is that you will not mistake uncertainty for danger. You will see it as potential, the blank space before creation. When fear whispers that you are alone, you will remember the long path behind you and smile, because you know better now. The final calling also asks something courageous, to share your light, not to preach it, not to prove it, but simply to live in a way that reminds others of their own. Your story is not an instruction manual, it's a lantern. Every truth you have learned becomes a flame that someone else can follow out of their own darkness. Sometimes you'll see the result, a stranger's smile, a friend's sudden courage, a child's laughter echoing where silence once was. Most of the time you won't. The light moves quietly, passing through lives without leaving signatures, but it moves, always. That is how the world heals, one person choosing to live awake. Tonight, as you sit in the stillness, imagine all the chapters behind you lined up like candles. Each one flickers with memory, the struggle, the lessons, the release, the peace, the abundance. Together they form a single thread of flame stretching through your life, unbroken. Watch how they merge into a steady glow. That is your story, luminous, whole, undivided. You might think this is the ending. It isn't. It's the first clear breath of a new beginning. Because every time light gathers itself inside a person, the world around them changes too. The places once defined by fear become ground for new creation. The relationships that were heavy become lighter. The body, the mind, the heart, all align with the quiet rhythm of being fully alive. You will wake tomorrow and still have responsibilities, tasks, maybe even struggles, but something inside will be different. You will meet the day not with defense, but with openness. You will trust that whatever arrives carries purpose. And when you don't understand the purpose, you'll wait with patience instead of panic. That is mastery, not control, but surrender guided by awareness. From this moment forward, every ordinary day will hold small reminders of extraordinary truth. A line in a book that feels written for you, a melody that seems to rise from nowhere, the face of someone you thought you'd never see again. These are the echoes of light reminding you that life continues to speak, softly but clearly, in your direction. So when you feel lost, pause. When you feel overwhelmed, breathe. When you feel blessed, give thanks. These three acts, pause, breathe, thank, are the heartbeat of every awakened soul. You have completed the circle. Pain to wisdom, confusion to clarity, searching to knowing. The work now is to live that wisdom every day. Stand for a moment in quiet gratitude. Feel the ground beneath you, solid and kind. Feel the air moving through your lungs, the same air that connects every living thing. Feel the pulse in your chest, steady and strong. Each beat is the light calling your name, reminding you that you belong here, that your existence matters, that your peace contributes to the peace of all. Now, speak this to yourself, not as hope, but as truth. I am light becoming brighter. I walk in peace, and I share it freely. Let the words rest in you like sunlight settling on water. And if this story has met you at the right time, If it has reminded you of your own quiet power, let your voice join the chorus of gratitude that keeps the world illuminated. Comment, "My light continues." Because this isn't just your ending, it's everyone's new beginning. The journey doesn't close with silence. It closes with a glow that never fades. I bow my head, not in defeat, but in gratitude. After the long road, after the storms that shaped me, I arrive here, quiet, awake, and whole enough to speak with honesty. I have searched for answers in noise and in silence, in others and within myself. Now I know that every step, every detour, every ache has been part of a single prayer. I did not know I was praying to come home to myself. So I breathe deeply, letting this air, simple, ancient, generous, move through me as blessing. I breathe in acceptance. I breathe out resistance. I breathe in light. I breathe out the dust of yesterday. With each breath, I return. I give thanks for the days that hurt me, for they taught me endurance. I give thanks for the nights that frightened me, for they revealed my courage. I give thanks for the people who came and left, because each one showed me something about love, how it opens, how it breaks, and how it heals. Nothing has been wasted. Every tear watered some unseen seed that now begins to bloom. In this stillness, I release what no longer serves me. Old fears that spoke too loudly, old judgments that built invisible walls, old expectations that kept joy waiting at the door. I lay them down gently, as one might lay flowers at the end of a season. I do not curse them. I thank them for what they taught and let them rest. Now, I ask for nothing but awareness. Let my eyes see what is real, not what is imagined by worry. Let my heart stay open even when the world feels unkind. Let my words be instruments of peace, my actions vessels of compassion. Let me live from the quiet strength that no one else can give or take away. I remember the many times I asked for signs. I see now that the signs were everywhere. The kindness of a stranger, the timing of a call, the calm that arrived for no reason at all. Each was a message saying, "Keep going. You are guided. You are not alone." Today I stop chasing signs and start living as one. May my presence be a reminder of calm to anyone who meets me. I forgive myself for rushing, for doubting, for demanding certainty before taking the next step. I forgive the younger versions of me who did not yet know how to listen. They carried me here as best they could. Their mistakes were not failures, but attempts at love. I bless them for trying. I bless my body for holding the weight of years, for keeping my soul grounded in this world of touch and breath. I bless my mind for questioning, even when questions turned into storms. I bless my heart for breaking open enough times to understand empathy. All of me is worthy of tenderness, and now I ask for peace, not the fragile kind that depends on perfect days, but the deeper peace that lives beneath chaos. The peace that knows the waves will rise and fall and still chooses to float. The peace that greets each moment with the simple words, "I am here." I pray for clarity, the courage to see truth without anger, to speak it without harm, to live it without pride. Let clarity guide my decisions so that I may build what is lasting and release what is temporary. I pray for compassion, not the distant sympathy that looks down on pain, but the shared understanding that kneels beside it. Let me remember that everyone I meet carries their own hidden battles. May I never forget that kindness, even when small, is a language every soul understands. I pray for humility, the kind that does not shrink but stands quietly in purpose. Let me remember that all wisdom is borrowed, all strength is shared, all victories belong to the collective breath of life moving through us all. I pray for joy, not constant, but resilient. The joy that survives disappointment, that laughs after tears, that sees beauty in what is ordinary. Let joy be the proof that I am still alive and grateful to be so. And above all, I pray for presence. Let me not live in the memory of what's gone or the worry of what's ahead. Let me live here, in this sacred now, where life actually happens. May each moment become a prayer in motion, each breath an act of thanksgiving. If fear returns, and it will, let it find me gentler than before. If sorrow visits, and it will, let it find me willing to listen, then to release. If love arrives unexpectedly, let me not hide from it. If opportunity knocks, let me answer with courage instead of hesitation. I do not ask for a life without pain, only for the wisdom to see that pain has purpose. I do not ask for constant happiness, only for gratitude that survives the changing seasons. I do not ask for perfection, only for peace in my imperfection. Tonight, I open my hands. Whatever comes, let me meet it with grace. Whatever leaves, let me bless it on its way. Whatever stays, let me nurture it with care. I offer this prayer not as a plea, but as a promise to keep returning to peace, to keep choosing compassion, to keep believing in the quiet goodness that hums beneath everything. Let my life be the answer to this prayer. Let my words and actions make visible what cannot be spoken, gratitude beyond measure. And when tomorrow comes, may I wake not asking, "What will the world give me today?" but instead saying, "How can I serve the light that already lives within me?" May this awareness protect me when fear rises. May it guide me when choices appear unclear. May it remind me that even the smallest gesture of love ripples through the unseen, changing more than I will ever know. I close this prayer in quiet certainty that I am whole, that I am guided, that I am enough. And as the last words fade into silence, I rest inside the truth I have learned again and again, that peace was never something to find. It was always something to remember. Amen. The night before had been heavy with silence, but when morning came, light entered gently, as if it had been waiting outside for permission. The first sunbeam crossed the room and rested on the photograph that had followed the whole story. Once a symbol of confusion, now a quiet witness to peace. You stood before it, still half wrapped in sleep, half in memory. The light caught the dust in the air, turning it into small stars that floated between you and the image. It looked, for a moment, like everything you had lived through. The chaos, the clarity, the trembling, had turned into particles of gold. You did not rush. There was no need anymore. The air felt patient. The day would unfold whether or not you hurried it. You took a breath and realized it felt different. No tightness in your chest, no old weight pressing down. Healing had not erased the past, but it had changed its gravity. What used to pull you down now kept you grounded. You looked at your reflection in the window pane. Older, perhaps, but lighter. Every line on your face told a story that no longer hurt to remember. They were proof of survival, proof of growth. The coffee pot hissed in the background, the small sound anchoring you to the present. Outside, the city was waking. Footsteps, car engines, the hum of ordinary life continuing. For the first time, you felt part of it instead of separate from it. That was the real reward, not perfection, but participation. The long journey through fear, envy, release, forgiveness, and rediscovery had led you here to a morning where you could simply be. The angels, the symbols, the numbers, all of them had served a purpose to guide you back to this simplicity, to teach you that peace was never waiting in the distance. It had been breathing quietly beneath every storm. You remembered the words that had shaped your steps. Let go. Trust the unseen. Find abundance within. Walk by faith, not by fear. They sounded different now. Not commands, but confirmations. They were no longer things to strive for. They were truths already living in you. You carried those truths into the day. Each motion became an act of awareness. The clink of the cup on the table, the warmth of sunlight across your arm, the heartbeat steady beneath your ribs. You realized that spirituality was never meant to lift you out of the world. It was meant to bring you deeper into it. Outside, the trees swayed, leaves flashing silver in the wind. You watched their movement and understood another lesson. Strength and flexibility are the same thing. The branches bent so they would not break. A memory surfaced. Nights when you had begged for signs, when you feared you'd been forgotten. Now, standing here in this ordinary morning, you could smile at that version of yourself with compassion. You wanted to tell them the silence was not absence, it was preparation. You sat down with your notebook, the same one that had held so many questions, and began to write, not from pain, but from clarity. The words flowed easily. I am not defined by what hurt me. I am shaped by what I learned after healing. I am not the storm. I am the calm that followed. You paused, looked out the window, and let the next sentence come on its own. And now, I begin again. Because endings are only half of every story. Healing is not the finish line. It's the beginning of true living. You thought about everything that abundance had come to mean. Not wealth in numbers, but wealth in awareness. The ability to see beauty, to offer kindness, to feel gratitude for even the smallest moments. That was the kind of abundance that could never be stolen. You remembered the people who had passed through your life. Some with lessons, some with love, some with both. You sent them silent gratitude. Each of them had played a part in your transformation, whether they knew it or not. The photograph caught your eye again. The shimmer that once frightened you now looked like light breaking through shadow, like sunrise caught in still form. You realized it had always mirrored you. What once confused you now inspired you. You lifted the photo, held it for a moment, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." Then you placed it back, facing the sun, letting the morning light complete its work. Outside, the world moved on. Children laughing, doors opening, the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. You walked outside, each step deliberate, each sound sharper, clearer. The wind carried a cool freshness, as if the world itself was beginning again. Standing on the threshold, you made a quiet vow to live without rushing, to speak with intention, to forgive quickly, to create freely, to see the sacred in the ordinary. The vow wasn't dramatic. It felt natural, inevitable. It was what life had been teaching you all along. You thought of the 15 chapters that had brought you here, the warnings, the reflections, the revelations, the release. Each one had been a step in a spiral that always curved back to light. The angels trembling, the numbers shining, the act of letting go. All metaphors for a single truth. Awareness is the only true miracle. You smiled because now you understood. The journey had never been about fighting darkness. It had been about learning how to carry your own light through it. The sun climbed higher. You turned your face toward it and closed your eyes. Warmth spread through you, deep and steady. It felt like approval, like completion. In that moment, gratitude rose, not as words, but as feeling. It filled your chest, expanded through your arms, reached into the space around you until everything, the sky, the earth, the people you loved, the strangers you would one day meet, seemed connected by a single glowing thread. You whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, but to life itself, to every unseen hand that had carried you, to every quiet dawn that had waited for you to notice it. Peace settled over you like a familiar blanket. You realized that the journey was not about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who you've been all along. The final calling of light wasn't a voice from the sky. It was this very moment. Breath, heartbeat, sunlight, stillness, reminding you that enlightenment is simply presence. You opened your eyes. The world looked the same, but you did not. The photograph, the light, the air, all were reflections of a truth finally accepted. You are part of the light that guides the world forward, one quiet act at a time. You took one last breath, steady and full, and stepped into the day. And as you walked away, the room behind you glowed with the golden light of morning, a silent testimony that the story had not ended. It had simply turned into life. Comment, I walk forward in light, because every ending is a beginning disguised in brightness. If this message spoke to your heart, don't leave without taking action. Subscribe to this channel right now. Help us reach 100,000 faithful hearts who believe in God's power. Your support keeps these messages alive and spreading light across the world. If you feel blessed today, consider giving a super thanks of $100 as a symbolic act of gratitude and faith. Every offering helps us bring more divine messages to those who need hope. And finally, share this message with 3 people you love. You might be the reason their miracle begins today.